Hello everybody, this is Christian here with Roguish, and today we're going to talk about a Magic the Gathering deck build. We haven't really touched Magic the Gathering on our channel at all. It's not really a video game, but it's still a game. I had touched it on another channel with some builds, and it turned out pretty well, so I'm just going to bring it to this channel. And yeah, if you're an MTG player, this might be a video for you. So what I'm going to talk about is a straight burn deck. This is going to be 100% red, and I've kind of organized it a little bit so that way it's more presentable. But let's just start getting into it. So damage, we're first going to talk about your spells, and I don't mean creature spells, I mean like instants and sorceries. Lightning Bolt, get yourself 4 Lightning Bolts. This is the best, like a really great burn card, everyone will tell you. It's 3 damage for 1, really useful. Get 4 of those. Your Shock, this is 2 for 1. This is just another good kind of real quick burn kind of a card. I'd also once again get 4 of those. Thunderous Wrath. Thunderous Wrath is 5 for 6, but it's got that miracle cost of 1, which you really want. It's very useful if you get that miracle cost and you can copy it, but we'll get to that later. Get yourself 4 of those as well. Up next is Chandra's Ignition. This one's really good late game. I don't really recommend you getting 4 of them just because when you use it, it's kind of almost like a suicide to you too. But this is a good field clearer. It clears out the field pretty well, especially late game when you're building up those war elementals, which I'll get to later. That's a really good card to have. Curse of Pierced Heart is next. This is excellent just because it's a good enchantment that stacks damage on your opponent, especially if you build 4 of them. This basically does 1 damage every opponent's turn, so that can really stack up, as you can imagine. Next one, this is one of the best cards for this deck, Curse of Bloodletting. This doubles damage, and as long as if you have more of them on the person, the better, because it doubles and then doubles and then doubles. That's just really useful for this deck, especially with what I'm going to talk about later. But the reason I'd recommend 4 of these, of course. The reason I have 3 of them is because I think I accidentally attached it to my opponent, and they must have taken it home with them accidentally. It got mixed in with their deck, so just be careful of that. Pillar of Flame. This is real quick. It's another 2 for 1, but this one, unlike Shock, kind of gives you the ability to exile target creature. If it's like a zombie or something that you're fighting, it just gives you some variety. And then the last one we have here, this one's kind of this one's kind of up to you. This is Devil's Play. It wouldn't be a burn deck if we didn't have Fireball, but Devil's Play is pretty much the exact same thing, except I think Devil's Play is better because it has the flashback effect. So you can cast it from your graveyard, which is really kind of better than Fireball. It does the exact same thing though. X damage, X is how much mana you paid. Pretty good late game, especially if you're building a lot of mana. I only have 1 Devil's Play, so I mean if you wanted to put it in the deck, you go for it as much as you want. I only have the 1 to show you though. So next we're going to go to the useful cards. These are still instant and sorceries. We haven't gotten to creatures yet, but the first one we're going to talk about is Reverberate. This is copy target instant or sorcery, and Increasing Vengeance actually is pretty much the exact same thing, except Reverberate can be enemy spells, where Increasing Vengeance is only your spells. However, it does have a flashback effect again. With this deck, like a lot of quick instant and sorcery decks, they focus a lot of quick damage and then flashbacking from the graveyard and using what you've already used again against your opponent. Next, we're going to talk about Fling. This is a good card. I wouldn't really recommend building 4 of them, though, having 4 of them in your deck, because you're not actually going to have too many creatures with this deck. It's mostly going to be damage spells, you know. But Fling is really good though if you were stacking up again war elementals, but we're gonna get there later. Still, the next one is Blasphemous Act. This is a really useful card because it is just a field clear. It does 13 damage to each creature, especially if your opponent is putting creatures on the field and you seem to be lacking with those creatures. This one costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the field. So if you didn't have one what is it, mountain, and then 8 of something else. It could be 1 mountain and X less of something else, depending on how many creatures they have. I'd go ahead and get 2 of these. Definitely, you know, 1. I feel like the more you have, the better you are, but just, I don't know, you don't really need 4 of them. Let's see here. Reforge the Soul. This is a really good card too, because this resets your hand basically. With this deck, you're going to be going through spells pretty quickly, and if you have this in your hand, you can get back to 7 cards really fast as well. Especially with that miracle cost, you can do it pretty in a cheap way as well. Next one, Fury of the Horde. This is an excellent card as well. It's a little bit pricey, but it also says you can remove 2 red cards from your hand rather than paying its cost, which can also be very helpful, especially because this deck is focusing a lot of casting from the graveyard. So even if you threw out spells, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to be able to use them again if they're instant and sorceries. This allows you to basically have another main phase, an additional combat phase, followed by another main phase. So like a second whole attack round. That's extremely useful once we talk about the creatures. And then there's this last one called dual casting. Honestly, this one can be discarded, at least in my deck that I'm using currently. I don't have dual casting, but it never seems to come to my hand, so I just kind of got rid of it. This one basically is an enchantment you put on a creature, and you can pay 1 and tap the creature, and you can copy a target instant or sorcery that you control. So if you're, if you have a creature on the field and you just got a Thunderous Wrath and you want to cast it for its miracle cost, you could do that and then pay 1 and tap this on your creature and copy that Thunderous Wrath for a total of 10 damage instead of 5. Really quick damage, kind of easy, but you kind of have to have a creature on the field, and with this one you don't really have too many creatures on the field, so that's kind of why I also wouldn't really advise it. Now we're going to talk about creatures. At last the time has come where we talk about the actual things that you will get on the field. To start off, War Elemental. This is the best card for the deck, pretty much, period. Well, I mean, it's really cool. This can't go into the battlefield unless an opponent's dealt damage this turn. However, since you're building a full burn deck, usually they're going to be dealt damage pretty much every turn, depending on how well you're using it. This basically gets as many +1/+1 counters as your opponent is dealt damage. So if your opponent is dealt 4 damage, this thing will get 4 +1/+1s, making it a 5/5 basically, and it only gets better from there. Next, Chandra's Phoenix. By the way, on the War Elementals, build 4 of them. Get them. You get as many of them as you can. They are super awesome. Next up is Chandra's Phoenix. This one is pretty cool just because it's fast, it's cheap. You pay 3, you get a flying and haste creature who can basically come back to your hand as much as you want. If it's dead and then your opponent's dealt damage, this can come back to your hand and then you can cast it again. Get yourself 4 of those too. Charmbreaker Devils. This one's really good because this allows you to get back some of your spells and stuff, instant and sorceries from the graveyard. This allows you to do it kind of randomly. It says you can return an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand randomly whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell. Also, this guy gets +4/+0 until end of turn, so it becomes an 8/4. You can build as many of them as you want, but they are kind of more expensive, so just kind of be careful about that. The next one up is Flamewake Phoenix. This one's pretty good too. It's also 3, it's flying haste. Unfortunately, it has to attack each turn if able, but you can also get it back if you control a creature with 4 or greater before your combat phase. You have to pay 1 to do so or whatever, and it actually goes back to the battlefield. It doesn't even go to your hand. This one's a little bit more iffy. I kind of took him out just because I felt like he wasn't doing too much, but he has had his moments of being helpful. It's the Emberwild Arger. It's this card, this faggot. This is really good early game. It's cheap. It's a 2/1. For 2, and its ability is what's really good for summoning up actually the War Elemental. if you can have him on the field, you can sacrifice him during your upkeep, and he'll deal 3 damage to your opponent, and then from that you can summon like a War Elemental or whatever. It's just 3 damage, real quick. You kind of have to have him in, for a whole turn. But usually on the second turn, 2/1s are kind of more intimidating than a 1/1. The next one is Rage Thrower. This one is a little bit pricier, but its effect is pretty good. He's a 4/2, and whenever another creature dies, it deals 2 damage to target player, and the creature does not have to be on your side. So if you're building a straight burn deck, you could just basically target as many creatures as you want, and it can take them down, and damage will also be dealt to your player. Next one is Fire Servant. Now this one I would really recommend. I only have one of them as a card in my collection, but I would get 4 if I could. This is basically if a red instant or sorcery spell would deal damage, it deals double that damage instead. Oh my gosh. So this is excellent, especially if you're building bloodletting. This is like the exact same thing as bloodletting, except it's a creature. So if you just stacked those 2 on your opponent, that would be insane. It's only 5 too, really, which isn't so bad. That's the same amount as bloodletting, except it's a creature too. So get as many of those as you can. Cinder Pyromancer. This is excellent because it deals 1 damage with his tap ability, and whenever you play a red spell, you can untap him. Now, if you're going up to the Chandra Ablaze Ultimate, that is unbelievable because you can basically cast every card, instant or sorcery from your graveyard in 1 turn, and you can constantly tap and untap him, but we'll talk about that combo later. Pyromancer's Assault. This one was kind of a later pick for me. Whenever you cast your second spell, this deals 2 damage to target creature or player. Just kind of more damage. Magmatic Force, this was a really good card too, but I wouldn't really recommend getting too many of them because they are really expensive, with 8 being the cost. But they deal 3 damage to target creature or player at the beginning of the upkeep, which is really good, and it's a 7/7. And that goes for any upkeep. It's you or your opponent. So those are the creatures that I'd go with. Kind of just pick and choose what you'd want. Definitely War Elemental, the Chandra's Phoenix. Get a few Charmbreaker Devils and Flamewake Phoenix. Maybe the Goblin Shaman, get yourself as many Fire Servants as you want. Maybe a few Cinder Pyromancers. I don't really know about the Pyro... This isn't even a fucking creature, damn it. I need to take that out. Shit. Okay. Magmatic Force, too. And lastly, we're going to talk about your Planeswalker. The Planeswalker is Chandra Ablaze. The voice for burn in Magic is the Pyromancer Chandra, basically. But her Ablaze version is, I think, just the best. Trust me, I've collected all of the Chandras. She's like my favorite Planeswalker, and this one is by far my favorite card of her. So basically, her +1 is you get to discard a card if it's red. It deals 4 damage to target creature or player. You can discard an instant or sorcery spell, and that'll stack up to her 3rd ability. The next one is each player discards his or her hand and draws 3 cards. Again, if your hand is full of instant and sorceries, you could use them, but if you wanted to really get rid of your opponent's hand, or you wanted new cards, the second one could be pretty good. And then the last one is the best. Cast any number of red instant or sorcery cards from your graveyard without paying their mana cost. This is exceptionally amazing late game, especially if you casted all your spells. You can cast all of them again. As far as mana goes, I'm pretty sure the count here is 26. 26 all mountain mana, 26 or so. Again, it also depends on how many of each number you go with. Just kind of keep it in the 40% mana, the usual. So the deck focuses a lot on multiplying your damage and recasting your spells. You don't have too many creatures, but it's also a field clearer with some of your spells and abilities. This deck pissed people off so much in school. Somebody, one of my friends, made a all-white anti-red deck, who basically meant he had some spells that simply said you couldn't take damage from red. And it was really cheap. Obviously he won, but it drove a person that much to to make a deck against this. I've been working on it for a few years, but it just, I don't know, thought I'd share it with you all. So with that being said, if you like this, please let me know. I've got more Magic decks that, you know, I could show you about. I just finished kind of working on one today as well. Leave a like and stuff like that. Subscribe if you haven't. And with that being said, I guess I'm just gonna see you later. So thanks for watching and goodbye.